Hey, my name is Jeff Gomez. I'm the CEO of Starlight Runner, and I send greetings to the people of Kaknästunet in Stockholm. Never surrender. In the next few years, Transmedia is going to move from an innovative marketing technique to a full-scale implementation technique. The development process for intellectual properties into which particularly a lot of money is being invested, the content itself will be developed in order to best take advantage of multi-platform. Spreadable media, as Henry Jenkins put it, rather than a single story that is repeated from one platform to the next over and over again, and so forth. But what's really going to happen is you're going to have the equivalent of rock stars, true transmedia artists who are going to be able to take in these hundreds of millions of dollars and invent lavish multi-platform narratives that are completely immersive and engaging. So the way that you'll distinguish them are the way that you know great movie directors or great painters or great performance artists, and that's what's going to start to emerge out of Transmedia. What is encouraging, what I'm seeing in Europe and in Northern Europe as well, is that there is a true curiosity being born in the networks and distribution systems in these countries that are making inquiries into how to finance multi-platform narrative, how to support artists who are engaging with transmedia, and that's really encouraging. I'm seeing that in Amsterdam, in the United Kingdom. I'm also seeing it in Australia, in Canada. Not as much in the United States, but I think we're going to have to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps. In the United States, most people are going transmedia. In Europe, they've stopped. They're just talking about it as a part of the discourse, a part of the conversation. We know that we need to disseminate multi-platform narrative because this is the fastest and easiest way to indoctrinate a people, educate a people in communication for the 21st century. It's just a natural way of being for us to move so smoothly and seamlessly between our media devices and between distribution platforms. I'm encouraged by Europe from that perspective. Transmedia is a dialogue, and that is my best advice to small businesses thinking about transmedia implementation. Think about starting a conversation that somebody is going to feel welcome to contributing to.
Hello to Kaknästunet. So I'm the founder and director of the Canadian Film Centre's Media Lab, otherwise known as CFC Media Lab. The Canadian Film Centre was founded by Norman Jewison over 25 years ago, and it's the kind of preeminent institution in Canada for postgraduate talent development and production and product development in the film, television, and new media industries. So Canada is a very rich environment, or has a very rich subsidy environment for content creators, I would say. So these subsidies take the form of a number of different things. One is direct investment. So we have places like the Canada Media Fund, the Bell Fund, a whole variety of different the TELUS Innovation Fund in the past, etc., that directly invest in the development of digital content properties. Now, just to be clear, we don't have anything called a Transmedia Fund, but we certainly have funds that are looking at developing properties that are attached to television programs, and we also have funds that are looking at experimental media. So both of those are direct investment from either the public sector or the private sector. And then we have a number of vehicles that allow for investment to be found across a variety of international jurisdictions. So Canada is well known for its co-production treaties, especially in the area of film and television. As of yet, we don't have co-production treaties in the interactive space, but that's something that that the CFC Media Lab is looking at right now and working with partners in Europe to see whether we can actually create the one of the first case studies of a transmedia co-production, and therefore develop potentially what some of the sort of variables in a treaty might be. The other thing that's also interesting right at this particular juncture in Canadian sort of media history is that there's quite a lot of money in the system that broadcasters have been mandated to spend in digital productions. So there's a lot of opportunity there for convergent productions to happen. The problem is that money is not very easy to get at, and you need to have a very solid relationship with television production community, or be a production house that actually develops multiple types of IP. So you have to be a production house that actually grows your own television, new media, mobile, gaming property all at the same time. To kind of put it simply, some of the ways in which we've done collaborations with Europe is in this kind of multifaceted R&D production dollars type of way that really has multiple outcomes associated with the development of a project. As I said before, it's really about looking at the development of co-production TV properties, and then through that, the development of something associated with those TV properties. And I think part of it is really, whether you like it or not, the kind of development of a new type of producer that really understands that the creative requirements for this new universe of media, of multi-channel media creation, transmedia creation, is that they need to understand not only how to tell stories across multiple platforms, but what the business models around that might be and what technologies to use to do that. You need to be kind of a Renaissance person, a 21st century Renaissance creator. And
hello!
Hello.
I hope you're having fun.
At?
Cork Nestuna?
That's
Crowdsourcing versus curation. And I think the concern about crowdsourcing is if we let people write themselves into our story, does it dilute the story, and then do we just get a lot of junk? Because really 90% of the people that create fan fiction isn't necessarily good, but that maybe 10% might be really excellent and adhere well to the story world. So we really need to figure out systems that help us identify who's appropriate to be a contributor, how do we integrate them into the creation process, and how do we reward them if we were to take that IP and turn it into something that we charge for. If we build the story world in the true sort of infrastructure or definition by which we operate on, which is each of the pieces of the story are unique and can stand alone, but when put together would create a greater depth to the overall story experience, I think we could allow room for some localization there, right? Because technically each of those pieces could be a little universe of its own within the larger story world. So I think that's a possibility, but we haven't really played with that yet. So I think that there's room for experimentation there.
Hello to everyone at Cockness2net. Then on the West Coast, it's often, I think, a lot more common to get people, because they're local to LA, to San Francisco, who either build things. San Francisco is very much a building city, where you have people who work at tech companies and startups and who are interested in how they make structures and software and platforms. Or LA, certainly, where you've got the entertainment industry and you've got a lot of people who want to tell stories or understand, to differing degrees, traditional media, film, television, publishing, things like that. Whereas in New York, where I was before I lived in California and before this conference, there's much more of an advertising focus. Advertising has a much stronger hold on the East Coast, so a lot more of the conversation is dominated not by what are the creative opportunities and how do we get funding to do these things, but instead, how can a brand participate in this process, or how do we use this to get people more interested in our product or to form relationships with our consumer communities. So certainly you find people on each coast who are interested in all topics. But I think if you were going to broadly generalize, the West Coast is generally more interested in the creative aspects of it, and the East Coast is more interested in the marketing and brand aspects. I would be thrilled to think that in 2 years we'd even have an idea of what we mean by the transmedia market. Right now, transmedia is really a lot of people in different jobs, very few people who actually have transmedia jobs so far, and instead it's just I would say it's a new set of practices and a new way of thinking about the jobs that people already have. So I think transmedia emerges in a lot of traditional media spaces, and I I can't tell exactly what a market for it would look like, but I would hope that 2 years from now, a lot of the things that people struggle to accept right now or have to think really hard about, how do we get different groups to work together, how do we think about sending a consumer from one platform to another, how do we think about letting the audience help tell stories. I'm sure a lot of people will still be struggling with those and just coming to those questions for the first time, but I would hope that 2 years from now, and even more so 5 years from now and 10 years from now, it won't be a special question we have to ask. We'll just be starting to think that way naturally. But different audiences expect different things. They have different ways of interacting with their media. You look at just kind of two distinctly different examples. You look at the United States and how people interact with media here. Probably Europe is more similar to that example as well. And then you look at Japan, where there's an entirely different set of expectations of what media is, what you should pay for it, what platforms it'll be consumed on. I mean, the mobile behavior alone in Japan is so dramatically different from how it is in a lot of the rest of the world that it's hard to understand if you don't live there. So trying to design a project or an experience that makes sense equally to someone in Japan and someone in America, just as an example of two international markets, requires a new skill that I think a lot of people don't have, which is understanding several different cultures' expectations at once. I mean, and the funny thing is, a lot of these trends, the idea of transmedia, a lot of the models for these things really come out of Eastern culture, and not just now, from the past 5, 10, 15 years. I mean, the mobile has been big there since long before it got big here. The idea of bite-sized media that you consume, the idea of wanting to be able to follow things out. I mean, there's a culture of, you look at Pokemon as one of the things that's escaped Japan and been big in the rest of the world, and that's a pretty good model for what it's like to expect to be able to engage with an entertainment property across as many platforms as possible. They have games, they have a TV show, they have movies, they have books, they have comics, and increasingly, the example that's talked about a lot is Japanese kids now grow up expecting that. I don't think kids in America have been quite as deeply entrenched in it. I don't want to speak to Europe as if I have more expertise than I do, but I don't think it's hasn't been as deep there either as it has been in a lot of the Eastern cultures. So it's, you want to talk about 2 years from now, if we look at, say, the third Storyworld conference, maybe in 2 years, I think one thing that would be really fascinating, hopefully, is that we'll have worked through enough of these basic issues that are common, that it's complicated enough just to look at Western culture, that hopefully we can start actually bringing together representatives from both Eastern and Western cultures and trying to figure out what we can learn from each other.